An MBBS student might ask, what is the purpose of a family being allotted to me for studying? The students get in a real life situation to see how the environment and health function together, how they affect each other, and can also see what health hazards can arise out of the environmental conditions or housing conditions of the human beings. They also get to practically assess the housing and environmental conditions that they have studied in theory. Apart from that, they can apply the concepts, the theoretical concepts they have learned about safe drinking water, solid waste management, about vector control, and housing standards. They can apply these standards here and see for themselves. Third rationale is an important rationale is that the budding doctor, to sensitize him regarding the social practices of the community where he or she will practice as a doctor. So the management of the patients depends not only on the medicines that you give, that you prescribe as a doctor, it also depends upon how the patient will take it and what are the social practices which need to be changed or modified to cure or manage the patient. So it is very important to know about the social practices of the community where you will practice as a doctor. Many institutes, they have a printed folder where the MBBS student can enter the information directly after talking to the family allotted to him or her. If there is none, one such format has been given in the blog and also in the lecture titled as Format for Clinico Social Case Taking. In these blogs and lecture, we have given the format for family health study of the case that has been allotted to you. In this particular lecture, the terms that have been used in the family health study will be explained. Now, the definition of family and what are the types of family. Family is a group of biologically related individuals living together and eating from a common kitchen. What is biologically related? Is relation, blood relation or related by marriage, and they are eating from a common kitchen. What is a nuclear family? It consists of a married couple and their dependent children only. If the marriage is in the first 10 years, then it is called a new family. What is joint family? Is more than one married couples are living together along with their children in the same household and all of them are eating from the same kitchen. Mostly all the men in such joint families are related by blood and the women folk are either their wives or their unmarried daughters or widows of the family. 3-generation family. The married couple has children and the children also get married and continue to stay with their parents and have their own children. So 3 generations who are linked by direct descent and they are living together eating from a common kitchen. Household. Household is a group of people who live together and take their meals from a common kitchen. Now, a household may have people who are related biologically or sometimes those who are not related. So, all the families are households, but all the households may or may not be family. Vital events include live birth, fetal death, adoptions, marriage, divorce, judicial separation, death, etc. The first column is recording the head of the family. How do you decide who is the head of the family? According to the census definition, you ask the household who is the head of the family and the person that they name is to be recorded as the head of the family. If you're not able to do that, then the person who is making the decisions on behalf of the household, with whose permission all the decisions are made, is called as the head of the family, and his or her name is recorded. It is not necessary that the oldest male member is the head of the family or the only earning member is the head of the family. Dependency ratio. Add up the number of children below 15 years of age and the geriatric members who are above 65 years. Divide this number by the number of family members who are in between the ages of 15 to 64 years of age, gives the dependency ratio. How is per capita income per month is calculated for the family or the household? The income from all the sources. Some may be earning by way of salary, there may be some rental income or some income from the village where they get money from parental farming. So all the sources of income is clubbed together for the month, and this is divided by the total number of family members regardless of their age. This gives the per capita income per month for that family. Socioeconomic status of the family defines the status of the family in the society where they live. It depends upon their education, material possession, and the money they have. So we have various scales which we will discuss about, like Kupusomi, Parikh and BG Prasad scale. Using this scales, the socioeconomic class is calculated and entered in the blank provided here. How to determine the socioeconomic status of a family. In case of urban family, the most commonly used scale is modified Kupusomi scale. Kupusomi scale was initially developed for assessing the socioeconomic status of an urban individual only, and it took 3 parameters into account, that were education, occupation and income of that particular individual. Later on, the scale was modified to assess the socioeconomic status of the family rather than an individual, and hence the name modified Kupusomi scale. Modified Kupusomi scale takes 3 parameters into account: the education level of the head of the family, occupation of the head of the family, and income of the whole family from any source. So all sources are pooled together to make the income of the family. Then scores are given to the education of the head of the family, occupation of the head of the family, and to the total income of the family. These scores are added up, and then we decide according to the given table what is the socioeconomic class to which the family belongs. The details regarding what is regarded as a professional occupation, semi-professional, skilled, semi-skilled are discussed in a blog on the same topic. If the family that is allotted to you is in a rural area, you need to use Parikh scale to calculate its socioeconomic status within Indian context. The Parikh scale consists of 9 items. Each item is given a score according to the table given on the next slide. The total score is added up and the socioeconomic strata or class is decided again according to the table on the next slide. The 9 items which are included in the Parikh scale are caste to which the family belongs, occupation of the head of the family, education of the head of the family, the level of social participation by the head of the family, the land family holds, the housing, type of housing that is, the farm power that is the type and number of animals, material possessions by the family, and the type of the family. This slide shows the scoring of the 9 items of the Parikh scale and calculating the socioeconomic class depending upon the total score. Assessment of overcrowding, whether overcrowding is present in the given household or not. There are 3 criteria which we will discuss in detail in the next slide. Here I will just enumerate them: persons per room, floor space criterion, and sex separation criterion. If any of these criteria is satisfied, we say overcrowding is present in the house, and we report it as overcrowding is present by this criteria. If there are more than one criteria, we say overcrowding is present by this and this criteria. If all the three criteria are met, we report overcrowding is present by all the three criteria. Now we will discuss the three criteria for assessing the presence of overcrowding. First is persons per room criterion. The total number of persons in the household is divided by the number of rooms in the house, but each individual is not counted as one. An infant, that is those who are below 12 months of age, those who have not yet attained 1 year of age, are not counted at all. Children between 1 to 10 years are counted as half a person each. All those who are above the age of 10 are counted as 1 person each. These are now added up and divided by the number of rooms present in the house. Then the accepted standards are given in the accompanying table. You can see that if there is only one room, then there should be 2 people, not more than that. 2 rooms, not more than 3 people, and so on. Second criterion is floor space criterion. You measure the length and breadth of all the living rooms, and when you add up, you get the total floor area available as living area. Then you add up the number of occupants of the house in the manner similar explained above. Divide the total area by the number of persons who are residing in the house that you have calculated. This will give the floor space per person, and the standards are given in the following table. Minimum of 50 square feet per person has been set as a basic minimum standard. Third criterion is sex separation criterion. According to this, if 2 persons of opposite sex more than 9 years of age who are not husband and wife are obliged to sleep in the same room, that is, obliged or must sleep in the same room means there is no other option but to share the room for sleeping, then you can say overcrowding is present by sex separation criterion. Mind you, must sleep in the same room means that because of limitation of the number of rooms, they are obliged to share the room. Another important note, which rooms to include for calculation the number of rooms or the area. All the bedrooms, sitting rooms, prayer rooms, dining rooms, servants' room are to be included as living rooms, and therefore they should be counted or measured for assessing overcrowding. But the kitchen, bathroom, latrine, store, garage are not to be considered as living rooms. However, if there is only one room where the family stays and they are using the same room for cooking purpose also, then that room is counted as single room. Judging whether the ventilation is adequate or not. Every living room should be provided with at least 2 windows, and one of which should open directly onto an open space. If this is not the case, we can say ventilation is inadequate and we can advise to use an exhaust fan. The other criterion is measure the height and breadth of the windows and the doors. Calculate the area of windows and doors by length into breadth. Total window area should be at least 1/5 of the floor area, and the total window plus door area taken together should be at least 2/5 of the floor area. Judging the adequacy of lighting in a room. You can judge the natural light or artificial light if it is adequate or not. We need certain instruments for judging the adequacy of lighting, the amount of lighting, but we don't have in a practical situation. So we can deduce from what Illuminating Engineer Society and Government of India have recommended that 100 lux of illumination in living room is sufficient. What is 100 lux? It translates as if you can read a newspaper, a newsprint in all the corners of the room and the center of the room and also in the darkest portion of the room. You can report that lighting of the room is adequate. Deciding whether potential or actual mosquito breeding sites are present or not. You know that mosquitoes lay eggs in accumulated water. Hence, we need to look for areas where water has accumulated for sufficient time period. So, what are these places? Inside the house, there can be desert coolers, flower vase, potted plants, water tanks, cisterns, old can, tires, coconut shells, bottles, etc., which are lying in the open, and water accumulates in them whenever it rains or water is thrown. Then you look around the house for puddles and roadside ditches which may be full of water, open drains, cesspools and soakage pits, old fountains where the water has been left, bird baths, ornamental pools which are full of water, etc. Then you report, if any of these are present, you report that potential mosquito breeding areas are present. Next, you go and inspect these water collections and see if there are larvae, mosquito larvae are present or not. You can see mosquito larvae in the figure on the right side. If you can see mosquito larvae or pupae in the water collection, you will report it as potential as mosquito breeding site present. If the water collection is there but there are no larvae or pupae, you will say potential mosquito breeding site present in the house. Now, flies transmit a lot of diseases, so you have to look for areas where there may be potential for fly breeding, where the flies may lay their eggs. So, what are these areas? Open heaps of garbage, old decaying fruit and vegetables, open cattle dung, and human excreta which may be exposed, accumulated sludge or organic material if the drains are open, and other similar sites where flies like to lay eggs. So these are the potential fly breeding areas. To see if actual fly breeding is occurring or not, you need to identify the earlier life cycle of the fly. And what are these? Eggs, larva and pupa. Eggs are laid on organic material, so you look into them, and these are in a cluster of 120 to 130. They are pearly white in color. They then hatch into larvae. Larvae are slender, white, legless, and they are known as maggots. They have a tapering end, and this is the head end. The larvae then convert into pupa. The pupa looks like a maroon colored, bright color capsule. Inside the pupa, larva turns into adult fly. Now, a period of 2 to 10 days depending upon the climatic conditions. The fly may develop inside pupa and break it open and fly out. So presence of any of these earlier life forms implies that fly breeding is present in or around the house. Types of piped water supply. So many houses you will find they have piped water supply. Water is being supplied by the municipal body or some other agency. So there are two main types of piped water distribution. Intermittent water supply, that is water is supplied only during few hours in the day, maybe 2 times a day. And continuous water supply, when the water is supplied 24 hours a day. Most of the cities in India have intermittent supply of water. Now there are some disadvantages of this intermittent water supply. The greatest disadvantage is that during the time when there is no water supply, the supply line or the pipes are empty, and a lot of times there is a negative pressure inside these pipes. So what this leads to, these pipes, somewhere something is leaking or decayed, they suck in the filth and mud from outside into inside because of negative pressure. And you must have seen that many times the sewer line and water supply line, they run parallel near to each other. And sewer line is also old, decaying and leaking. So whatever is sucked in the pipes, in the drinking water pipes, may contain this sewage also. So this leads to contamination of water in the drinking water supply. And this phenomenon has been identified as the reason for number of waterborne diseases like outbreaks of typhoid and outbreaks of hepatitis A. Other disadvantages are that when there is an emergency need of water, the water may not be available. There is a need to store water because water is supplied only for a few hours in the day. And this storage of water may lead to contamination of drinking water. And also potential for mosquito breeding because mosquitoes lay eggs in stored water. Then the timing of water supply may not be convenient to some consumers. So they may not be able to store water. When the water supply is there, they may not be at home and they are always short of water. Hence, if possible, the preferred system of water supply is continuous water supply. Note, this mistake is often made that if the household stores the water which is supplied in intermittent water supply in an overhead tank, and then the time when there is no water supply, this stored water comes into the taps. This is not continuous water supply. Continuous water supply is called when the water supplying agency is supplying the water for 24 hours in the taps. Then there is no need to store water. This is called as reference Indian adult man and reference Indian adult woman. The Indian Council of Medical Research has defined a reference Indian man and a reference Indian woman. Why? Because of certain recommendations that they give, for example, calories, vitamins, various nutrients. The recommendation is generally made for a reference man and a reference woman. Then depending upon that, you can calculate the requirement for a child or a lactating woman or a pregnant woman or old age. So a reference Indian man has been defined by the ICMR as between 18 to 29 years of age, weighing 60 kg, height of 173 centimeters and a BMI of 20.3. He is free from disease and is physically fit for work. On a typical working day, he is engaged in 8 hours of his occupation, which usually involves moderate activity. And while he is not at work, that is after the office hours and on non-working days, he spends 8 hours in bed, 4 to 6 hours in sitting around and moving about, 2 hours of walking, which includes walking, going out for walking, doing household duties, or walking during active recreation. A reference Indian woman is again 18 to 29 years of age, not pregnant, not lactating, 55 kg, height of 161 centimeter, BMI of 21.2, is free from disease and physically fit for active work. On a typical working day, she is also engaged in her occupation for 8 hours, which is considered to be moderate activity. When she is not at work, those days she spends 8 hours in bed, 4 to 6 hours sitting around and moving about, 2 hours of walking, which may be because of going out for walking, doing household duties, or just moving around. Now we will introduce the concept of consumption unit. Why is consumption unit needed? When we are measuring the food intake of the family that is given to us, we need to know whether each person is consuming sufficiently or less or more. But how can we do that? Because when we measure the food consumption of the family, it is the whole food consumption for the day for the whole family. Or for that matter, sometimes you may measure it for the whole community. Then what is one person consuming? Is it sufficient or not? We cannot say, because one family of 5 members may have all 5 adults. The other person who has got a family may also have 5 members, but 2 adults, 3 children. So if they are consuming the same amount of food, then either this family is consuming less per person, or the other family with children is consuming more than required. So how do we get around this problem? To resolve this issue, it was decided that the energy needs of women and children can be expressed as a percentage or a coefficient of calorie consumption of 1 unit. So the energy consumption of an average male doing sedentary work was taken to be 1 unit. And then the calorie requirement of women, children, or males doing heavier work were expressed as relative to this one sedentary man, as given in the table. We can see that adult male sedentary worker is 1 unit, moderate worker 1.2 unit, heavy worker 1.6 unit, sedentary worker female 0.8 unit, and so on. So we can calculate the total number of consumption units in the family. Now it is said that 1 unit requires an energy of 2400 calories per day. The original concept of consumption unit was developed by Indian Council of Medical Research only for calorie needs. But then it was so convenient that the National Nutrition Monitoring Bureau has been using the requirements of even other nutrients other than calories per consumption unit only. So consumption unit was mainly developed for calories, but now it is also used for other recommendation of other nutrients per consumption unit. Here an example is given for calculation of the total number of consumption units in the family. All the members of the family, each family member is allotted the appropriate coefficient of consumption unit as per the table. In this example, the head of the family is a male 31 years old and clerk by occupation. So he is a sedentary worker, consumption unit of 1. The wife is 28 years old and is a housewife. We consider housewife to be moderate worker, so consumption unit is 0.9. The elder child is a male who is 12-year-old. The table says 1 consumption unit. The younger child is again a male, 8 years old. The table says consumption unit of 7. We add up all the consumption units, 1.9, 1.7, and so total is 3.6 consumption units. So all the total consumption of food materials or nutrients will be divided by 3.6 to obtain the consumption per consumption unit. Now the concept of recommended daily allowance, recommended dietary allowance RDA. We know that humans require carbohydrates, various nutrients like carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals, etc., so that they remain healthy and active. And continuous research is done to identify which nutrients are required and in which quantity for different age groups and different genders. And then further research is needed to translate this requirement of nutrients into requirement of food items. And food items differ from place to place. Some places in India only you eat dal, chawal, sabji, roti. Other places you eat dosa, idli, etc. So the habitual diets of different communities differ. So therefore each country needs to do its own research so that it can measure the nutrients in the habitual diets of the country and give the recommended daily allowance for each age group and gender in the terms of food eaten by its population. So this recommended amounts per day is known as recommended daily allowance or recommended dietary allowance per day. It is defined as the average daily dietary nutrient intake which is sufficient to meet the nutrient requirements of almost all healthy individuals in that society for that particular life stage and gender group for which the recommendation is made. So RDAs are given for different groups such as for adult male, adult female, infants, children, pregnant women and lactating women. In India, this exercise is done by Indian Council of Medical Research. It does the research and makes recommendation and releases the recommended daily allowances for Indian population. And these RDAs are also revised from time to time depending upon new research. methods of dietary survey. We previously discussed about the amount of food eaten by the family and dividing it by the consumption units and comparing with RDAs. How do we measure the amount of food and nutrients consumed by the whole family? This is known as dietary survey, measuring the amount of food items and nutrients that is consumed by the family. We measure the food items that the family has eaten, and the nutrients in them are decided by tables which are given in an ICMR publication known as Nutritive Value of Indian Foods. So all the Indian foods have been researched upon, and their nutrient values, like what is the amount of protein, vitamins, carbohydrates, minerals are present in each Indian food, has been researched, and the tables have been given in this publication by Indian Council of Medical Research. Now, how is the food consumption of the family measured? That is various methods of dietary survey. There are various methods of dietary survey, and each suitable for different set of circumstances. Weighment of raw foods. The survey team would visit the household and weigh all the food that is going to be cooked for the day. And second visit is made to see what has been left over, and that is subtracted from what was supposed to be cooked. So we can measure the amount of raw foods that were actually consumed. Second is weighment of cooked food, similar to the above, but the cooked food is weighed rather than the raw foods. Now this is not suitable for family visits because weighing of food is not acceptable in Indian families mostly. So this is more appropriate for when you want to assess the dietary consumption of institutions like hostels, etc. Third method is 24-hour recall method. Here the main person who cooks for the family recalls what has been cooked in previous 24 hours and consumed. This is to be done for 7 different days of the week, because if you do at least for 7 days and all different days of the week, because a day may be different from others. For example, a family fasts on a particular day, or one day the family goes out for eating. So if you happen to measure the intake on that day, it will not be reflecting what is a normal consumption of the family. Then another method is food frequency questionnaire. This is more for assessing how frequently an food item is consumed. For example, weekly consumption of fruits or vegetable or milk, eggs. And so this is not appropriate for measuring the precise amount of food intake. It is mostly for what item is consumed more in which family. So this is not suitable for measuring the daily diet. Then food balance sheet method. This is suitable not for family but for at a much larger scale, like for the whole nation or a state or a city or maybe even global level. Then duplicate sample method, where the whatever is being cooked is one part is cooked, the second identical part is kept aside for the surveyor to measure. The most popular method utilized for the family study to study the amount of food eaten by a family is 24-hour recall method. Some amount has been explained above before, and a more detail is given in a blog and lecture on 24-hour recall method of dietary survey. Preperium is a period of 6 weeks following delivery. This period is important because whatever changes took place in the organs and body of the women during pregnancy, they slowly revert back to normal state. This preperium is also known as the postpartum period. Recommended time for commencement of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding should be initiated early, that is within first hour of birth or as early as possible, including those who are born by cesarean section. Then colostrum, which is the milk secreted for the first 2 to 3 days, must not be discarded because it is very essential for the newborn, as it contains protective immunoglobulins and cells for fighting infections, and it protects the newborn from infections. No prelactal feed should be given to the newborn. What is prelactal feed? Normally, some food items may be given just after delivery, mostly as a part of tradition. just before commencement of breastfeeding. These usually include honey, gutti, or depending upon the local custom. Pre-lacteal feeds are totally not recommended. What is exclusive breastfeeding? Exclusive breastfeeding means the child is breastfed and nothing else apart from breast milk is given. The child may be breastfed by the mother, or maybe by the wet nurse, or maybe the mother is expressing her breast milk, which is then given by a spoon or whatever method. But apart from breast milk, no other liquid or solid is given, not even water or dal water. No gutti, nothing else. Even if the weather is extremely hot and dry, water is not to be given. Then only it is known as exclusive breastfeeding. Though there are some exceptions, like if the child gets diarrhea and requires oral rehydration solution or oral vaccines, oral vitamins, or some medicines. If these are required or prescribed by the doctor, they can be given and still the child will be called as exclusively breastfed. Exclusive breastfeeding is recommended for at least 6 months of age. For till 6 months of age, the child should be exclusively breastfed. Complementary feeding means complementing the breastfeed with semi-solid food. So you have to complement the breastfeed, not replace. After the age of 6 months, mostly, breastfeed milk is no longer sufficient to meet the nutritional requirements of the child. So there is a need to introduce complementary feeding over and above the breast milk. And for ensuring that the nutritional needs of the child are met, the complementary feeding should not be confused with weaning. Weaning word should not be used. The complementary feeds should be started timely, that is, before the breast milk starts. As soon as the breast milk starts to be inadequate, the complementary feeding should be started. The amount of complementary feeding should be adequate. It's not just a small 1 or 2 spoons are given throughout the day and you relax. No, it should be adequate in amount so as to meet the growing child's nutritional needs, and that it should be safe. That is, it should be hygienically prepared and hygienically stored using clean hands and clean utensils. Bottle feeding is totally not recommended. Weaning. Weaning is the gradual process through which baby reduces its reliance on predominantly milk and shifts the reliance on the family food. So this usually involves introduction of first semi-solid and then solid foods till the child starts eating the family food largely. The process varies from culture to culture, and it should be seen that the weaning food is adequate and the right kind of food. Remember, weaning does not mean discontinuation of breastfeeding. It just means shifting from predominantly milk diet to predominantly family solid diet. Now, the fully immunized child is a definition given by the Government of India under Universal Immunization Program. A fully immunized child is defined as a child who has received all the due vaccines up to 1 year of age by 1 year of age. A completely immunized child is defined as a child who has received all the vaccines which are due up to 2 years of age by 2 years of age. These terms are mainly used for surveying when you measure the immunization coverage, like the percentage of children who are fully immunized or percentage of children who are completely immunized.